right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode in our series. Today is going to be with our special guest, Amy Vedder. Very excited to have her on. Met Amy like this about 4 or 5 years ago and had some conversations. And recently at an area meeting, I got to hear her talk about what she does for her clients, and I was blown away. And a lot of I could relate to a lot of what she spoke about. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, being a connected leader and how to transform your firm's culture. So, Amy, thank you for doing this. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the compliment as well.
Well, let's dive into it. So, when you talk about being a connected leader, right? Why is it essential to have being this type of leader to transform an accounting firm's culture?
So I think when I started in the profession, and I don't think it was different in any other profession, but leadership was taught a lot differently, as if you needed to keep a wall between you and the people that work for you, not get too close to them. Make sure, that if you had to fire them, you could. And so it was a very negative way of kind of looking at leadership. And I think there was always this perspective of just not knowing what it took to become a leader, and it just seemed this mystery. And I think our culture, and I don't think any of us wanted that per se, but we didn't know we could speak up, we could change things. And this generation is speaking up for the things that they want and need, much different than our generation. And I truly believe what is important as far as our culture is that we are truly coaching, mentoring, leading the people that work for us. I think the leadership word can be a broad term, and a lot of times we are really elevated, we keep being elevated to different levels, where a manager responsible for people, but really, we're just more on the technical side. That's the side we like to be on. And then there's some people that are really people. And then there's some people that have never been taught how to
Right.
be people and to actually coach and train. Because, like I talk about in my book and in this presentation and workshop, we go by what we've been taught. We go by what we've seen other leaders do. And so the whole concept behind being a connected leader is first understanding where our belief systems even come from about ourselves, about the things that we do, the habits that we have, really uncover that, whether that be a family background, whether that personal background, friends, teachers that could have said something to you that you've been carrying, and whether those beliefs really resonate with you. And then secondly, once we touch which don't, how do we nurture people one by one versus one to many, and make sure that everybody is living to their full potential and has the tools, the learning that is specific to them that they need in order to be successful.
If you manage a team of 10 people, 20, two people,
Mhm.
200, every single person is managed differently. And folks
Mhm.
don't realize
Yeah.
um, what you have that is equal with everyone is accountability. Everyone's going to be held accountable. However, to reach that is everyone needs to be managed, and I experienced that firsthand. Because you look at age ranges, like you mentioned, the new workforce and how they think and process and what their expectations are. And so you manage an age group. Mine was 20, was a young fella, 22 to 65. And there's so much experience, just so much, new blood, hungry blood, and I tried to manage everybody the same way, and it's just not the case. And then even that being said, Why isn't the 65-year-old person in this management? He did not want to be in that role. He said that you could never pay me triple what I make to be in that role. And he was
Right.
made representative, but he never wanted it. And a lot of folks sometimes think that just because you're the best at best accountant, best tax preparer, best advisor, you're the best leader. No, it's not the case at all. And
Exactly.
so the uh, when it all will start with the mindset of these folks, right? And so can you talk a little bit about, everyone uses work-life balance very loosely. Could you talk about how you think that work-life balance is with the B2B, the 3B, right?
B3
3B,
method. Yes.
three.
Business balance and bliss. Yeah. Yeah, so I, come from this background. I'm a CPA, worked in public accounting, started as an auditor, had a CAS practice, or what's now called CAS, for a very long time. And, you know, what we're dealing with in the profession isn't anything new, except that, again, people are speaking up. And I think especially since COVID, and I don't even think it's generational. I think it's just anybody has kind of reassessed their life and how much time they want to spend working versus, making sure that they're fulfilling their personal lives too. I was actually listening to a podcast today, and the guy on the podcast did all this research about how to live a good life, and and it was it's a Harvard study, and they actually did it for 83 years. It's the longest study ever done. And they asked people when they were dying, what is their biggest regret? And the number one thing was, I worked too much and I didn't spend enough time with my family and friends. And this is a really important thing that, even looking at your future self, your future 80-year-old self, what would you tell yourself today of, what's important, and where do I put priority? And I think with work-life balance, and I know I felt this too, because I've always been a motivated career person and, have worked hard. But I think there was stressors around work-life balance where you kind of look at other people and say, "Oh, they're doing it. Why can't I figure this out?" Or, as people that know me know, I'm a yogi, and so they go and try yoga and they're like, "Yep, I'm not feeling anything." Like, but she is. So why is that? So it's really not about the quantity of time that you spend on an activity, it's the quality. So it could be 2 minutes. And the most important thing is that you are taking breaks to reset, to re-enter to the present, to not take one meeting into the next meeting, meaning if you are frustrated, how do you reset yourself so that you don't get frustrated in your next meeting or take it out on a bit, or even if that's your family and friends after work, as well. And so, how do you separate all of those things? And that really means what I call in the book work-life harmony, not work-life balance, is that it's just the ebb and flow of your day and really practicing techniques and tools so that they become easy for you to tap into, that you can incorporate them into your day as a commitment, as consistency, and sticking with it. But once you start doing these things, it truly transforms how you're feeling at work. I've been doing, with the book that I launched last year, Disconnect to Connect, I've been doing workshops, the Connected Leadership Workshop, with managers, senior managers, directors, partners on up. And we practice these tools, and I continue group coaching with them. And the most amazing things that have come up is I was blaming my workplace. And once I started taking control of myself and making sure that I was resetting, I'm happy again. I'm happy in my work. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm putting the right amount. And this is even during busy season. Like it's things you have to practice outside of busy season so you can keep it up. But it doesn't mean you're not going to have heavier times, but what are the things that you need to do so that you're not blaming the outside world, that you're really looking at what things can I be responsible to shift?
You have to control the controllables, I always
Mhm.
say. You can't control everything. However, you can, and folks get discouraged because they can't control everything, but what you can put that energy and focus into that. And
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. I was talking with Amy prior to doing this episode today, and I'm in India, right? And so I travel a lot here, and as soon as I get back, I gotta go to Vegas, and there's a whole itinerary of conferences and meetings. But that doesn't matter because I take time for exercise. I take time where I don't have my phone with me. I take time to just focus on breathing. I've realized that just that aspect of just
Mhm.
tuning your breathing for 5 minutes, because you mentioned like people try yoga and they can't do it. I can't, I'm very restless. I can't sit still, but I do find many 5 minute periods where I'm just just focusing on breathing. I
Yeah.
tell you, it changes the whole course of the day. It's
And
unbelievable.
that's a very good example of it doesn't mean you have to go to a 60-minute class to experience mindfulness, right? Like it's how you actually, but you, the way I look at those tools is that you have to practice them because when you need them, you want it to be something that your body can just do, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not forced. And a lot of times I compare it to getting insurance. Like you can't get insurance when you need it. You need to get it when it, right? So, and this is the same thing. It's not waiting until you have a busy time, till you have a stressful time in your life. It's starting to play with these techniques and tools in your life, right? In your workday, um, at any time so that when you do need it, when you do have a stressful day, you're like, oh, yeah, I learned how to slow down my breath. I'm going to take a few rounds of deep breathing and then go into that meeting to make sure I show up in the way that I want to show up.
Exactly. And it's so important because things happen and your life, you could have a personal issue, you could have a work issue, you could have a stomach issue. But you know what? When you're in a client-facing role, that client doesn't give a crap about that at all.
No.
You need to separate yourself. And I do this all the time because I know that client scheduled a call. I can't put my trauma on. They don't care. It
Yeah.
is all about them. So how do you get there? And I tell you that 5 minutes, because there's a buffer and just take 5 minutes to just breathe. I'm ready to rock and roll. And then after the call, the problems arise again. But no,
Yeah.
it truly does help. And you mentioned the books that you wrote. What was the backstory of writing them? Because you're CPA through your career, but what triggered you to share this knowledge?
So I've always been a speaker in the profession, probably now for 25 years point. I did a lot with technical training and grew over time. And as I started transitioning and changing my habits, my belief systems, and working through even changing how I worked, uh, I started wanting to let people know because I do believe, and this is a very strong belief. I have a grandfather that's a CPA. Um, this and many small business owners in my family, including myself, accounting is the language of business. It is such an important part of the world. And I think we don't realize that because we're grinding it out so much and we read these articles and so forth, but people being burned out is not a new thing in this profession. And I've been burned out many times in the work that I've done in the profession as well. And when I started making these shifts, I really wanted to start changing what I was speaking about to help people be able to figure out how to maintain this work that they love, but also be a part of their families' lives, their friends' lives, and not lose that, right? And not lose themselves. I think we lose ourselves sometimes too. And so I started on that path of um, writing the B3 method first, of really talking about this concept. And honestly, when I originally, I think that book launched in 2018, I think. Um, and when it did, there was definitely people like, there's no accountants that are going to want to hear this. No one wants to talk about this. I was getting a lot of from outsiders, this wouldn't be accepted in the profession, and they were very wrong. Number one, and in my gut, I knew that if I needed it, other people are sitting in silence, not,
Yeah.
or they're quitting, right? Like instead of
Yeah.
being able to find, how do I maintain all of this? And um as I started going through the process of training and speaking and seeing the impact that it was making on people, and people telling me their stories of the shifts that they were making, and the impact it made, it gave me the confidence to what I even though the book came out last year, Disconnect to Connect, I consider it a prequel to Business Balance Bliss, because the question I would get all of the time was, what was your journey to get there? How did you get to this place of, deciding to change your life? Well, it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of hard work. And, there is no easy button to shifting your mindset to your life and personal growth. And so a lot of us want that easy button to not have to go through the muck. But so it took me years to get this book the way that I did, to make sure that it is my personal stories, but it's also very much enough for you to get into your own stories and exercises for you to do, to help you go deeper into that journey. And it's just been amazing. I mean, actually, even this week, I was at a consultants group, and one of the consultants in the group had read my book on the plane, and we had like a 3-hour discussion of me never knowing that person's backstory, and now that person having more questions of mine because of reading the book. And it's just, I have, such a deeper understanding of all these people I've worked with for so long, because it's just opened up these conversations that have never been acceptable probably in the workplace. And there's just so much more understanding and compassion, and it actually makes you so much more multidimensional. And I think people feel closer when they actually do know your real story and they are inspired. Everybody's got a story, and I've been so inspired by the work each person and what they've shared.
No, I love it because you and I'm glad that you said that, it wasn't like a 1 week transformation. It just happened. It took time. It took a lot of, I mean,
Years.
it's constant, years, exactly. Change is
And it's not
constant,
over. It's never over.
exactly, ongoing. And people are fearful of change. They don't realize things are changing all the time. Now, I used
Mhm.
to hear a lot of when meeting with a client, they'd be like, yeah, we've been doing this for 30, 40 years, and now we're meeting with you, looking at this offshore stuff. And they're very like apprehensive and begrudgingly going about this. And I'm like, listen, I'm here to consult you and tell you how this will work, but you need to have an open mind and relax because the change is now for you. So let's discuss how this could work for you. And so I think that just having an open mind and exploring is key. What are some of the challenges that that you see when working with clients initially, and practices, as far as getting this off the ground? What are some of
Yeah.
the common challenges?
Well, and one thing I want to it's not just open to it, it's having the courage, right? Like the courage to go into a domain that you've never been before. And that's hard. Like I know that when I had my yoga studio, and I owned a yoga studio for 9 years, and people would come in and be more afraid of what happens on a yoga mat than going to CrossFit, right? Because you're alone with your mind. You being still is hard. Listening to what's going on in there, is definitely can be like you have to have courage to get on that mat, to be alone, to get present, to get still, to just allow yourself to process. And I think that that's we are trying anything new. It's having that courage to not be the expert, to yourself to just go through the process, and nothing is going to feel good in the beginning, right? Like because it's uncomfortable. But
Yeah,
as you go through the process, you start understanding because you've never done it before. And so once you start going through the process, things start coming together one by one, making sense. Um, I think I got this one testimonial from a company that I consulted with, that they called it business therapy, that in the beginning they wanted to keep pulling out because they didn't understand what they were doing. And then it came together and it was the best decision they ever made. Because it's not something that your mind is, it's not the norm, right? Like that's not what you've been doing for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so you're
yeah.
teaching your brain a new pattern, a new way of thinking, a new way of processing, and that's hard. So I think the biggest thing is that when I go into a firm and organization to talk about doing these workshops or doing coaching or consulting with them, I think the biggest thing that they have to get over is I'm not going to tell them what to do. So a lot of people want like, well, you'll just tell us here's the answer. No, I will give
Yeah,
you a framework and I will guide you through that framework, but you've got to come up with the answers because everybody's answers are different. And I
yeah,
don't know what that is until we uncover it, right? And we've got to uncover that together. And the stories we're holding in our bodies and our thoughts, sometimes we don't even realize they're sitting in there until we go through the process and we're open to the process. So it's really being realizing that you do have the answers within you, but you've got to be open to being guided there without pushing it down, without on the days that it's hard going back to, well, this has always worked for 20, 30 years, why should I change? And then, what will happen is we start blaming the outside, well, I don't understand why our staff can't appreciate the things that we're already doing and blah, blah. And we'll go there instead of doing the work because it's easier to go there than to get still, to actually self assess and then go, okay, what shifts do I need to make in order to affect the people around me?
I like that. Courage. Yeah. So then I'm looking back at when I first started this breathing exercise with my friend who kept telling me, and I was like, I don't have time. Kept ignoring, excuse, deflect, deflect.
Yeah.
And finally, I got to do something because there was a point where I have a beautiful head of hair, but I was losing my hair. I was gaining weight. I thought I was happy because I made great money, but I was literally dying.
Hmm.
And I was like, all right, what do we do? And then we did the exercises, and what I found is that 30 minutes is just too much to focus on.
Yes.
After about 15 minutes, I was over it. So what do we do? And then, yeah, I can understand why people are like, "Ah, this doesn't work. Let's go." but it's like, wait, adjust, make
Right.
adjustments. And I found 5 minutes of just, yeah, I mean, I like lose my mind, or sorry, I lose myself into my
Yeah.
mind, but
Yeah.
I have to set an alarm because otherwise I'll, and then those 5 minutes are game changers for me. So it's making adjustments. But yeah, I was always deflecting. And then I got the courage to say, all
Yeah.
right, I got to do something. And I found out what works. So
Yeah.
yeah, fully agree with that. Um,
Yeah. You can't do
now,
it before you're ready to hear the message, right? Like someone can say it over and over, but until you're ready to hear it, until you're ready, like that, I've got a quote in my workshop until, the chains of habit have, gotten too tight, you know, and you're feeling the struggle of it, you're not going to break it. Right. And
nope.
then you kind of are brought to your knees, and then you're like, okay, I've got to do something, right? I've got to be open to something else, even if it feels weird, it feels strange, it's not my norm. But what is that thing?
And it was, I look back and I'm like, annoyed at myself that I took a year of deflecting this because during that time, like I was gaining weight, losing my hair, and I thought I was happy, but I wasn't, but I look back again and then I'm proud that I made that
Mhm.
transition at some point. And a lot of people will focus just in general too much on all the negative aspects. So I look back, I'm like, wow, I did this. This is working for me. I've expanded into different, not just, going to a gym and just pumping weights. I'm doing plyometrics and calisthenics and
Mhm.
I've floor Pilates. I've tried,
Yeah,
and that,
it's the
holy
journey.
that is like a full body uh of CrossFit on the floor. I don't know how or what they do, twisting and turning, and then it started moving into different aspects of health and fitness. Guess what? The weight started coming off, my hair grew back, and I was actually happy. And
Yeah.
so it is a transformation. And so when you say transformation, a lot of people put timelines, 2 week transformation. I mean, if you do it, great, but don't put timelines on it. You just
Well,
you
and
you
just like you said, it's gonna open up other things. You're like, once you start seeing that, you're like, well, I wouldn't have done this before, but now I am doing it. And then you start being open to other things you wouldn't have done before because you're like, maybe I need to rethink that because, you actually saw something that worked for you that would have gone against your belief system a year prior, right?
spot on. And now,
I think too that there can be a little bit of guilt that happens with people as well that prevents them from doing it. Like, my problems aren't that bad. There's people with worse problems, and we kind of push it down and we compare our problems to somebody else's, and you just can't. Everybody internalizes things differently, and we also can't feel guilty for doing things for ourselves because, as you probably have seen with incorporating this into your life, haven't the people around you been given a gift as well?
I'm less angrier.
Yeah. Yeah, they're getting the good parts of you, right?
Yeah, and I always tell folks too that there's a friend of mine who's a day trader, right? And when you're a day trader, holy cow, I've sat in on a couple of those sessions. That is just wow. I mean, it's
Oh
intense,
wow.
like, and I'm
Yeah.
sweating. Um, but the thing is that very disciplined going about day trading. However, the rest of his day-to-day life is just chaos. And I said, and he wasn't really progressing. And so I shared information with him. I said, you got to live your entire lifestyle, very, regimented, structured, but you can't just turn it on and off for this day trading thing.
Right.
And so started making those decisions. And a year or two later, dude's banking. I mean, he's making dudes good money. But for a year, he was stuck. He was just stuck and he's just angry and complaining and this, that, and maybe it doesn't work. And I was like, hold on. Like you once your sessions are over in the morning, you don't have any structure. And so you have to do it, it becomes part of your lifestyle. That's what I'm trying to
Hmm.
say. And it works and it's become part of my lifestyle. And then you reap the rewards when people are just kinder, nicer all around. Absolutely. Um, a little over on time, a couple more questions now. Uh, the so what role are you seeing yourself play, or sorry, what role do you see in the organizations playing in supporting their employees for this to be ongoing? Is it just the managers, leaders, or is it kind of everybody involved? How do you see that for the full transformation with your clients?
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, it always starts at the top. It has to,
Sure.
because you can't just be words. No one believes it. So they have to see that you're really open to that change as well. And then it kind of goes down each leadership rung after that. But you'll see when you start making a change, starts uh, uh, impacting without you even saying it. You don't have to say a lot of things to impact others. It can be in the way that you go about things and the way that you're more open and understanding, the way that you're communicating in ways maybe you haven't done before. But I do think it's really important that it becomes eventually the vocabulary of the entire organization, not just in one area, but it's got to start at the top. There's got to be a belief at the top that it's real, that they're not going in a room and saying all the right things and then walking into their office and saying, "Oh, I'm never going to do that," so because that won't work, and no one will believe in you, right?
Yep.
The most success is really starting people through a learning process and then continuing. Doing one workshop will open people's mind, but it doesn't actually create the habit. And so it's what you can do consistently afterward to keep that momentum going and really making the investment and commitment uh, into your culture. And that culture, if you really mean it and you really want to do it, it means that you've got to do the long game.
Spot on. And for our listeners out there today, given your expertise in doing this for 25 years, what advice would you offer our listeners looking to harmonize their professional and personal lives? How do we sum this up?
Yeah, I really, it begins with us. So each person really taking that time to start the journey is where we start, making change in this profession. No one, you can't look to others to do it. It's what's our 100% responsibility. And what are the things that I am going to take as my 100% responsibility to actually shift the future?